Hi guys. One of the reasons I decided to create this channel was because I wasn't seeing many other first wave starseeds willing to talk about their experiences, especially on video, which can be extremely daunting to say the least. I suppose much of the hesitation is because these bodies are so much older than the newer starseeds and beautiful hybrid children in their youthful human flesh who are recently so active on YouTube and social media. The work they are doing is enormously important. Yet I can't help but feel that our story also needs to be told. If for no reason other than the struggles of paving the way for younger light workers to drop in and take over. And that's the way it should be. When we came in, the world was not at all ready to hear our stories. And as you know, especially back in the 50s and 60s, some who attempted to tell the truth about UFOs and ETs or share extraterrestrial knowledge were terribly penalized and forced to keep still through threats of harm or even death. A few were even diagnosed as insane and institutionalized and drugged. This is pretty strong incentive to keep quiet and just, live our lives with as much peace and joy as possible. This is really why we came. Now, however, a very different story. Yet, even so, most of us who did come in with the first wave of volunteers after World War II are either too old or too tired or just choose a quiet life. And obviously some of them have already left the earth plane. Nevertheless, with that in mind, we have lived a full lifetime of experience. Some episodes, hopefully, that the newer light workers will never have to go through as we did. Although to my mind, there is as much positive as negative in being a starseed, either then or now. I wouldn't trade the life I've had with any other, from the stars or from the earth. So, that said, the subject I want to bring up today is one I have never found others talking about in quite the same way. So it may be new to you too. And this is something my guides shared with me a little more than 3 years ago. I was sure I would hear other starseeds or hybrids talking about this, but not so far. So here goes. I have been very aware, especially over the last 10 years or so, that when I look back over my life here, there are certain times and events that don't seem like they belong to me. Some of you have probably had similar feelings such as this when you look back on your younger self and wonder who that was that made those stupid decisions or did those questionable things. Well, this is a bit like that, only it goes even deeper. This knowledge was given to me after I had continually been asking my galactic family why I never seem to know exactly what's going on. Not only in this life, but also in my dreams. I watch others in this life just going along, living normal lives, most seemingly knowing exactly what they're doing and where they're going. And I don't mean necessarily that they're doing the right thing or making the right choices, or it's just that they have a direction and they just go forward doing that thing. I, on the other hand, am always sort of out of the loop. The odd thing is that I excelled in higher education, science and physics. Maybe simply because it was my intention to do so. I hoped it would help me to fit in. And I guess to a large degree, it did. However, what I'm discussing here is different than that. What it's like is, it's like I'm an actor who has joined the cast midway through a play, and everyone knows their part except me. I'm just watching for clues from others to know when I'm expected to step in and say my lines. This unease has followed me throughout this life, always observing others to see what they're doing and hoping it will trigger some similar inclination in me. Hasn't happened yet. I mean, I've learned to become very independent and outwardly confident and composed, and can talk to most anyone about anything. But inside, always hoping to discover the script and stage directions that will finally explain my character to myself. Crazy, I know. So, after asking for clarity on this dilemma for a few years, the information finally came in from my guides about 3 years ago or so. When I asked why now, rather than when I first brought this up, they explained that when an ET is embodied into a 3D life, both circumstances and environment can become pretty murky. And in order to bring information through and have it be able to be received, the frequency of the starseed must be equal to the information coming in. And in the humdrum routine of everyday life, the density often gets in the way, sometimes for years, while the person lives their life. What they told me about this difficulty I was having was that I am not only a first wave starseed, but this is also my first life on Earth. So in this case, what happens is, get ready for this. Previous to the star child of any age coming into the body, and this can be an ET of any age coming into a body of any age, they will go through a process of having 1 or 2 Earth lives inserted or installed into their memory to help them to navigate through the upcoming human life. Otherwise, in this initial life, they'd be like a fish out of water, not knowing what's going on or how to act and behave. These inserted lives are lives they have not actually lived in the physical, but are implanted into the soul consciousness of the star being. So to them, this appears as a real life, real memories. And if this person were to later be regressed hypnotically, these memories, these lives, would show up as their own actual past existence. I mean, it's like, who are we anyway? Well, what is really helpful in understanding these concepts of timelessness and simultaneous existence and memory implants and timelines is the fundamental knowledge that we are all multidimensional beings existing on many planes at the same time. All lives we have ever lived or will ever live are happening concurrent to this one. So there are no past lives as such and no future lives. Keeping this in mind is very useful. I asked my guides how this insertion of false memories happens. And they explained that depending upon what the soul wishes to experience in the upcoming lifetime, other terrestrial lives with these similar situations or conditions will be chosen to be embedded into the star being's soul essence. These lifetimes are chosen from within what some are calling the AKASHIC records, with the permission of the one who actually lived the life. So the star child will be implanted with a holographic imprint containing all the experiences and emotions of that life. It becomes their own, and at the end of the life they live on Earth will become a permanent part of their own Akashic record. So that soul ends up gaining a full lifetime of experience and wisdom without actually physically living it. Blows my mind. This process is done to help the first timer to adapt to the extreme contrast from their own extraterrestrial life and home to living a life on Earth. They are first advised and counseled about the risks of a terrestrial life in order to make sure they still want to volunteer. This is all carefully overseen by a high-level advisory body who assists the soul through the process of accepting or rejecting the lives shown to them, and are constantly advised and guided. And this is all toward the benefit of the seeded soul, because it will always be that soul's ultimate decision. Of course, once the starseed has come into the body and is living their human life, having gone through the veil of forgetting, they will have no memory, or very little, of having gone through this implantation process of choosing and accepting these lifetimes as their own, but will nevertheless benefit greatly from them. And this use of AKASHIC implantation is also why so many believe that they were Joan of Arc or Jesus, Queen Victoria, or Napoleon. Their stories and the wisdom they gained from those extraordinary lives are within the Akashic memories of many others who have lived lives on Earth. It's like they borrow their knowledge. When I came into this human body, for some reason, I still retained memories of this planning stage of my incoming life. I distinctly remember these kind, benevolent beings reassuring me and asking me over and over if I was really sure I wanted to come to Earth. They warned me of the dangers of getting lost once I was heavily immersed in the density and would have forgotten so much of my ethereal origins. When I first met my husband, I told him about remembering all this, about these wise counselors who I've always referred to them as my ethereal guardians, and how excited I was to be accepted as a volunteer, to be seated in a human body. I was so anxious to step down onto the planet that nothing they could do or say would persuade me not to come. They showed me holographic visuals of war times and scenes of great tragedies, but they also included beautiful and touching scenes of love and respect from the life I would live. And some were so engaging and delightful that it only inspired me more to commit to a life on this mysterious alien world called Earth. Another part of the knowledge the guides shared, it's pretty wild. And again, one I haven't heard discussed in this detail. And that is the aspect that throughout the lifetime of a starseed walk-in, there may be occasions within that life where the consciousness walks out for a brief time. This can be due to a desire of the immersed soul, or illness of the body, DNA adjustments, or a myriad of other reasons. So most of us have heard of walk-ins, but I have not heard another discussing a walk-in leaving and coming back. And there's more to this. Not only can this happen, but sometimes when there are situations where only a small fragment of the consciousness is required, then the soul is able to manage and operate 2 or more bodies at a time. If there's a situation with a walk-in that requires a more elevated or expanded consciousness, then more of the soul essence can be brought through as necessary. If, as I mentioned earlier, it becomes necessary for the consciousness of the walk-in to leave for a time, the body doesn't die. It it continues with that life. But the consciousness that operates it is in a starship, while the soul projects its conscious awareness from aboard the ship while in a state of stasis within a cryo or immersion pod. And those in contact or living with the human will usually never notice any difference, while the soul essence is projecting its existence from the ship. And it turns out that this really isn't that unusual, because the majority of walk-ins are doing just that. The entire time they're occupying or controlling the physical body, because they really aren't residing within the body, but managing it from beyond, usually within their own starship. You know, this knowledge that I receive from my galactic guides, for most of my life, I just figured that all of what they were giving and showing me was for me alone. I mean, they were my guides with me since my arrival. So I felt it was kind of my own guidelines for life. So I pretty much kept the information to myself. Not because I didn't want to share it. I very much did. And, when I was able to find someone else teaching or sharing some of these same things, it was so exciting to me. That's why I love theoretical physics so much. So, over time, when questions came up in conversations with others, I would share what I thought might be appropriate to the conversation. However, I do want to say that at least half the time when I did share any of these kind of outlandish ideas, the other would look at me like I had bugs crawling out of my eyes or my hair was on fire. So listen, please feel free to dismiss anything that doesn't resonate with you. No worries. Take what feels right and dump the rest, or save it for later. I will say, however, that it has been so beautifully validating over the more recent years when I have found some of these same principles spoken about from other extraterrestrial sources. Also, I have been taught that one can only receive data and information from the level or frequency in which they vibrate. So the higher our frequency rate is, the more knowledge we can absorb. We not only grow as we learn, we also learn as we grow, as we expand our consciousness, our knowledge. And the more we expand, the higher our frequency and the larger capacity we have to learn more. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.